The morning program out of the heart of Newry to you, wherever you are on the planet, whether it be Mayo Bridge or Manitoba, you are extraordinarily welcome. Jimmy Lyons, diver, undersea man, a wonderful scuba person, from the realms of Neptune, Pierre Stenowy, the Girona, the Lusitania. Did you dive in the Lusitania?
We have plans, maybe, if we get the
It's all Ballycotton, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, the one you dived on was the Laurentic.
Oh, yeah, we did quite
time
a bit
out
on
of
it,
number,
yes.
Absolutely. No, James was in at the very beginning of scuba diving in Newry 57 years ago. He commenced it in his bath over at, that's a long time ago, isn't it?
It is quite a long time ago.
We were both founder members of the Newry Aqua Club. And the one before that was St Anthony's Aqua Club.
Yes, that's correct.
But you're a pagan. Well, no, you're not
pagan. I
never
knew how we ended up with St Anthony.
Yeah, lost and found. You get lost at sea, you'd get found again. That would have been it. It was my uncle Pat who managed to get himself ultimately lost by drowning, God love him, off Galway.
He did, yeah.
That was a Pat hand. You know, people often say to me, your brother was a diver, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And you know something, Pat? Or Jimmy? That was a Freudian slip. I didn't do that deliberately, that was a Freudian slip. And very welcome Freudian slip too. But I mean, he wanted me to dive with him that weekend. This is my uncle Pat in Galway on the Corrib.
Yes.
They were blasting a trench across the riverbed.
They were, yes. They were laying a pipeline across the river. So they made a sunken road, which then they dug through the centre of the road. And when they meet rock, then the divers would go down and blast.
Yeah. Well, on that weekend, the Pope was in Ireland, and that was why I couldn't be with them. Over there. Pat had said, come over, Rowan. He was with a fellow called Joe Murray, and he had, Pat was wearing his dry suit that year for the first time.
We'll call it a navy dry bag.
A navy dry bag.
Yeah.
And they were going across the river to weight and lower a rope, isn't that right?
That's correct.
So that boats could come and go in the Corrib that weekend.
They were finished the day's dredging at this time. And it was their task to sink this rope down. It was a rope that was laid across to guide the digger out on this sunken road, that it would dig through the centre of the road longitudinally or across the river. And in the evenings they would sink the ropes down to let the little salmon boats in and out in the evenings. So this was the procedure they were at.
Pat decided, he told sometimes the labourers would have gone out and done that.
That's correct.
And Pat said he was in his dry bag.
Yeah.
And he said to them, look, sure, I'll do that. And we'll do that. And they went out and would go lower and lower and lower. And the Corrib was in spate.
Yes, there was a large rainstorm up in Lough Corrib. And this sort of, we'll call it a mini tsunami, came down the river, a big flush of water. And it capsized the little boat that they were in. And unfortunately, Pat wasn't wearing his neck seal.
Because he wasn't diving, and that's why he didn't wear it.
He just had the suit on, which had an open neck, and there was a detachable neck seal. And this was the reason that his suit filled up with water.
That was the end of it. And his compadre was carried away. He
had his neck seal.
No, he was wearing a wetsuit. I think he was wearing a wetsuit, which is inherently buoyant.
Yes.
And you know, Jimmy, I always feel to this day, if I'd been with Pat that day, I would have been wearing a wetsuit. I would have been inherently buoyant.
Yeah.
And do you think that in any circumstance he would have escaped from me?
I do. I think if the guys on the shore had have acted correctly and cut the rope at one side and let him the current would have penduled him round to the other side.
To the other side.
But this didn't happen. There was a confusion and it didn't happen, and within a few short periods of time, Pat was drowned.
Pat was drowned.
He did make a gallant effort to get ashore.
He did.
They actually did stumble on we assume it was a submerged rock or something, and he just hadn't the energy to right himself.
He was a great man.
Powerful man. Oh,
powerful 100%. Man. He introduced certainly me to the adventure, and you to the adventure of diving.
Oh yes, indeed. Yeah.
He really did.
Oh, he was.
And I heard about it. The hotel's no longer there. I got the phone call from Marie that night. I was in the Montrose Hotel that night. I was having my dinner and I was staying overnight to go to Phoenix Park the next morning to cover the Pope's visit for RTE.
Yeah.
And the phone rang and took the call. She says, Rowan, Pat's dead. Poor Pat's dead. That was it. Sad business.
Yeah.
Anyway, more exciting business. What about the day you emerged up through the streets of Dublin? And people looked, my God, it's a Martian. What sort of creature is this coming from another land? Tell the people about that.
Well, I was commercial diving at the time, and we were working on the Matt Talbot Bridge. And at the southern end of the Matt Talbot Bridge, there is a manhole nearly in the middle of the street, and it leads down to a chamber underneath, which in this chamber there is it's a flooded chamber, and there is a big non-return valve which at high tide it closes and stops the water from backing up into the drainage system. And I was down there inspecting it, cleaning it, doing a sort of maintenance job on it, and I was wearing a helmet, which is a large orange type helmet, and
big spotlight in the middle.
I pops up this ladder,
wings on it,
and I looked straight ahead of me, and there was a girl driving a car across the bridge, and she seen this apparition coming up out of the ground. I don't know what went through her mind. She thought it was maybe a man from Mars or something, and she swerved a little bit and struck one of the cones or the bars. That we had sort of painted bars protecting this area that we were working in, and she struck one of them, and we had to take her into the local pub and sit her down and get her a drink to
it's amazing the way you wouldn't have,
but I was sitting in the pub with the gear on. So it was quite an experience, all right. Yeah.
Do you remember the Topaz?
Oh, I do, yes.
Dundalk Bay.
Yeah, I do, sure.
Do you remember the day you guys, we went out on the trawler to try and find the Topaz? And were you there the day they put me down on the anchor?
Yes.
And I was telling them about what happened that day. That was crazy.
I remember being
we were
out
searching
with you.
for it.
We were looking for it.
We didn't know exactly where the wreck was.
Yes. And we went down, and was it after it was been salvaged at the time, I think it was during the period at that time. And I don't really remember much detail about it.
But to find it, first of all, I remember the trawler man was in full swing up on the bridge. He told me around the place looking for it.
I remember it.
And I, like an Egypt with a mask full into my face like this here.
Getting towed around, yeah.
We eventually got it, and we went down and went down the shot line. But there was always that moment in going, it's called a shot line, when you drop it from the boat down to your location on the seabed. Mm-hmm. And in going down, you commence and you're suddenly going down, the sunlight's there, and you're going down the shot line hand over hand, and suddenly it becomes a different kind of colour.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a lovely colour. It's like, I used to call it a sort of pantomime green. Yeah. There's a green phosphorescence.
There's a phosphorescence in the water
a kind of feeling of it, And then suddenly the whole wreck is there ahead of you.
Yeah. You see the dark shadow first to differentiate between the sort of the seabed, which is usually a grey at this time, and you can see a dark sort of image, but you can't make out what it is until you get closer, and it gets clearer and clearer, and then eventually you see
it's suddenly there in one blink. There it is. The wreck is there. At any stage did you, in your diving career, Jimmy, founding member of the Newry Aqua Club, did you ever experience a touch of the bends?
Oh, I did, yeah. On the wreck you were speaking of, the Laurentic.
Oh, the Laurentic, yeah.
It's slightly deeper. It's around about the 40-metre range. And we were doing what we do on the wreck, investigating, swimming, having a look-see, and I stayed a little bit longer than what I should with the enthusiasm
would you like to tell me what a little bit was?
Maybe about 20 minutes.
Oh, 20 minutes, yeah, that's all right, 20 minutes.
And we had, it was our habit at that time, to drop a tank, a spare tank.
Onto the line?
On a line down to a depth underneath the boat.
Yeah.
And there was other divers there, English divers actually, and I was relying on this tank to give me enough air to decompress.
Yeah, so you would, for people, he would have been hanging onto the line, the tank was fastened to the line,
Yes.
and you would have been breathing the
I
air.
would switch from my tank,
your tank to that tank,
yes.
and you would have been breathing that air from the bottle for maybe an hour. Would it have been an hour?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
Depending on how long you stay.
The decompression.
And when I got back up to the tank, it was very little air left in it. It had been breathed down by these other divers, and it came about that they didn't really need it. They were doing sort of decompression stops that they didn't need to do.
Yeah.
And there wasn't enough air there for me. So when I got into the boat, within about 10 minutes or so, I started to get pains in my shoulders, and this is where the bends kicks in. It's bubbles in your blood that stops the circulation, and it was on a wet weekend, everywhere closed. So we went back into Port Salin Harbour, and Pat Hand that we were speaking about, your uncle, he pumped up a few more tanks, and I spent the rest of the evening, the rest of the night, walking around the seabed, picking up golf balls. There's a local golf course there, and these old golf balls, they're all chipped and whatever. I filled 2 onion bags full of golf balls that evening.
Breathing that evening.
Waiting for the recompression chamber to open on a Monday morning in Craigavon. So,
sweet suffering God.
But there you are. That was my experience.
But in walking around that night, were you confident it was going to be okay?
I was quite relaxed down there. When you go down under the water, the pressure puts the pains away.
Yeah.
And to get relief of the pain was a major thing, because it was quite severe, the pains. And I survived all right, no problem. And it took me to Craigavon. They recompressed me in the chamber in Craigavon, and then I was released within about 2 days' time, and I was fine.
You're fine.
Thereafter.
It's in your family. I observed earlier this morning that 200 years ago, your ancestor was a fish.
Stop.
His father was a diver.
My father was a diver,
and was your grandfather a diver?
No, he wasn't,
no.
but my father
But your father was the council diver in the canal.
He was. He was trained by a company in England called C.B. Gorman.
Goodness gracious, if you wanted trained today, you would probably still go to C.B. Gorman.
And they make the old copper helmets that people are familiar with, the old standard dress. And he done work in the Newry Canal and goes down at the Lock Gates and Fulham and stuff like that, and they sent him over to England to get trained, and he did as a younger man. Yeah. And there's photographs of him in the old Newry thing of my father working at the canal. Yeah.
It's a grand sense of continuum that you're a diver, he was a diver.
Yeah, it's a coincidence, really. I never really thought of it that way. I never thought of my father as a diver or whatever. And it's only when I met your uncle Pat that I got interested in it,
In diving,
and through you as well.
Yeah.
Because you and me have always been friends, and
we have.
Your connection and Pat sort of
brought us all together.
Yeah, brought us together. Yes.
But we had many wondrous expeditions. On Sundays we would gather and go away, towing the boat with us very often.
Indeed, sure.
We went to quarries in winter time when we couldn't go into the sea.
Yeah.
And the clarity of water in the quarries.
They aren't there now. You see, they're all filled in now.
They're all gone.
So there are quite a few in England where they do diver training.
Yeah, which is.
And there's a few still in Ireland, but not very many now, because they were a danger to.
Yeah, they were, of course.
People lost in them swimming.
Well, you know about that too.
Yeah.
You've found people and rescued people.
Oh yeah.
Well, recovered people. There was no rescue because the poor souls were gone.
Yes, that was.
What was the procedure? Because before we came along, Jimmy, unfortunate people were taken from the Newry Canal dead, and they were taken by a process of grappling hooks.
Grappling, yeah.
A hook on a line was thrown in, it was trawled across the bottom of the canal, and the unfortunate person was found and recovered eventually. And then that changed, and there was no police diving team at the time.
There wasn't, no, and the police would ask us to come to a scene where there was a potential drowning, and we would go in and have a look, and a look being the operative word, because the Newry Canal, you can't see anything in it. It's just sort of nil visibility. And
So what was the procedure? Was it a grid search, we used to call it?
well, we did a rope search, usually across the canal or in a circle round. We could drop a weight and do a sweep round.
Extending the sweep every
Extending
time.
the sweep every time, and eventually you would find, depending on how good the information was you were given at the time before you went in. Because a lot of people say, oh, you went in there. But there is a slight drift in the canal.
Of course.
And the body can be disturbed, you know, it can drift down.
Obviously, without breaching of any confidences at all, maybe you would remind me of a particular recovery operation that perhaps affected you more than any other.
Well, it was one, it was a few I remember distinctly, nearly them all, but there was one time there was a young gypsy boy was trying to recover his ball that went into the canal, and it was in the middle of winter, and he stumbled and went in. He was only 2.5 years old, and I went down. It was at the old steam packet shed. Do you remember it? Alongside the docks there.
Big black shed.
Yes, and I went in, and it's quite a drop down into the canal at that time. It must be about 6 or 7 feet.
6, 7
down.
feet, yeah, of stone wall.
And I went in and I searched up and down and couldn't find anything. Now, it was around the time when the troubles had started in Newry, and there was several vehicles in there. And you know, you bump into these things and you swim around them, and I say it's all sort of nil visibility. You can see nothing. You just grope around with your hands. And I surfaced and I shook my head. I couldn't find him, and I went back down to have another look. And it was a Volkswagen car, and the wheels were gone off it, and his body was in the wheel arch of the car.
Was the car on its roof?
It was. Oh no, it's on its
Sitting properly.
Sitting properly, yeah.
And his body had
sort of
lodged
sloped like
in
this.
the wheel. And a child
in the rear
size.
wheel arch of the car.
Small.
Yeah.
Small child.
So the wheels had been stolen off it before it was pushed in. So that was a sad one.
But isn't it an extraordinary thing, Jimmy, that things like this, I wasn't involved as many times as you were in that, but I was, I think, twice involved. And my observation is that it's very strange that having done that, and I think the same applies to you, when you went home in the evening, there was never any terror, there was never any feeling of trauma that you had done something that was causing you a problem. We were always kind of quietly happy to
you'd
have
be
done.
reflective of it. Seeing that young child so young, a life taken so young, was I still think of it, you know, and it was a bit upsetting at the time, but not. You sort of you come to grips with it, and you know it's a job that you need to do, and you sort of get on with it.
And the contentment of knowing that you're bringing the dead one back to the family.
You're bringing a sense of finalisation to the thing, you know, and it helps. I think it helps the family to cope with it, you know, because I have been thanked on a few occasions by the families of the people who.
Of course you would. Of course you would.
Sad scenes, but there you go.
Diving has changed today. You go into the water wearing an electrified duvet, or the diving equivalent. You know, when we started, we bought neoprene, we cut it out to a pattern, we stuck it together with glue, and then we stitched it.
Yes, we did indeed, yeah. We
That was
made our
the
own suits, yeah.
And then we had our own biological way of getting warm in the water.
Oh, stop.
You tell the people
No,
what
you
we did.
No, I
No,
don't.
you
I
did.
never did that. No, ever. You're.
Methinks he protests too much.
I think you should tell the people what.
With a wetsuit, the principle of the wetsuit is that water comes in, and there's a human hair's width of water held between body and neoprene, and that heats up by your body, and that's where you get your warmth. Well, there's another way of getting more quickly warm. So
this is Rowan's way of doing it.
he said, but in the water, with the water flowing through the suit, if there is an inclination when you hit the water to pee, and that pee will warm you, and then by the time it's dissipated, your body is. Stop it!
Does it? Oh, all right.
Oh, look at that! Look at that! Oh, you're some boy. You're some boy. But today's the technology is the great the great heated suit. Have you got a heated suit?
No, but my friend has. He's just purchased a heated vest that it works off a battery.
Wow.
And I know
Who's
I'm
that,
going to
Jerry?
suffer by this. This is Jerry Brown I'm speaking about, and the guy I dive with most of the times. And he's want to stay longer and longer because of this heated vest, and I
He's a
will have
fish
to
as well.
sit there with him because of the buddy
Shivering.
system that we
You're-
have.
You're sitting there.
I'll be sitting shivering, and he'll be sitting quite wondering what's wrong with you, Jimmy.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
yeah,
so
yeah.
this is where I'm putting off as long as I can investing in one of them.
Yeah.
It's a sign that you're getting old, you know. So.
Well, but listen to me. You can take Tom in there. Call him in, yeah. Call him in. That's our next guest coming. We're talking earlier about Tom Newman, and Tom will be in with us shortly. But we've been talking for half an hour. Can you credit that?
The time
Can you,
flies,
where does
doesn't
time
it?
go?
Yeah.
Time
Especially
go.
when you start me on about diving.
Oh, sure.
You know,
there's nothing else in our lives. But I mean, but you were the great plumber as well, for goodness sake.
Oh, stop.
Those days, the heating engineer Lyons.
Well, I gave it up for quite a while. I went commercial diving, but then when I got too old to do that, I came back to the plumbing again.
Yeah. You'll be diving too.
Now I'm retired. I'm totally
from
retired.
the plumbing, but not the diving.
I get asked to do wee jobs for friends and that there. That's all I do.
Did you find that the kind of compression of under the water did loving and wonderful things to your body?
No, I did not. You're an evil guy.
I know that.
Switch it around to something.
That's Natasha England.
Hi, Natasha.
Aiko. How are you, baby? It's good to see you. They're coming shortly. Jimmy, thanks for talking to me.
You're welcome, Rowan.
Andrew, we have some music, have we? Take care. Not Aiko. That's for later. God bless you. Go well. Take care.